Hello flight simmers, Weeper here and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I thought I'd take the time to answer the 10 most asked questions. Let's get started. Here's number 10. Why do you play dress up? That's the kind of question that's normally asked by guys who are jacked up on Red Bull and Cheetos and live in their mom's basement playing Call of Duty for 8 hours, but nonetheless, it's a pretty appropriate question, I think. Why am I playing dress up right now? Well, for one, it's part of the channel, but why do I wear a flight suit and gloves every time I fly in my cockpit? I guess my question to you would be, why would I not? I spent $120,000 on this cockpit in order to give me the best immersion possible, so why not just wear the flight suit and gloves to go with it? Now, I do have a working G suit. I have working oxygen. I don't fly with that stuff. It becomes more of a hassle than what it's worth. It's more or less a conversational piece when I have friends over who want to kind of go for the full experience, or the fact just to do it to try to make the cockpit as realistic as possible. But you know, I definitely do it for a cool factor. It looks good in the videos, but I also do it for a comfort factor. At 6'3", 240 pounds, I'm about as big as you possibly want to get to sit inside that cockpit. And if I get in there to just do a short little test on something, I got shorts or pants on. Every time I sit in there, I find the shirt's riding up my back. I have to keep adjusting it. For some reason, the belt's staying in the middle of my back. So yeah, for one, it's just way more comfortable to put on the flight suit to jump into the cockpit. And the gloves, I do it because I try to keep the hand grease off a lot of the stuff inside the cockpit. Sweat will seem to wear things down a lot more than anything else. But also, since I'm using real indicators that actually use bulbs instead of LEDs, things like the threat warning indicator, when those indicators are on for a 2-hour, 3-hour flight, they actually get quite hot. So when you're touching them, the gloves kind of shields you from the heat as well. So yeah, you know what? I bought this cockpit. I'm very serious about my flying. So absolutely, I'm proud to say, with no shame, that I play dress up in the cockpit. Let's look at number 9. Why do you hate DCS? I don't hate DCS, that's for sure. I just like to make little jokes. I haven't flown DCS in probably 4 years, but back in those days, I purchased all the mods. It was a lot of fun. I more or less make a poke at it because it's a very common trend on the forums. What's more realistic? What's better? So I just like making jokes from here to here, you know. I mostly do it because I get a lot of guys who first discover my my Instagram page, my project, will say, they always will say something like, how come you don't fly DCS? It's more realistic. Well, I guess if you're measuring realism by graphics, absolutely, I'll give you that. But when it comes to avionics, tailoring the F-16 avionics to the country and block of your choice, I mean, yeah, there's really is no contest. BMS is way more realistic than DCS when it comes to operating and flying the F-16. I don't want to turn this into a debate, but in the end, I don't hate DCS. I just do them for little jokes. If you can't laugh at yourself, you know, life is just way too short for that. With my job as a police officer, my past job in the army, the military, sorry, you know, we've always made jokes, and yeah, you got to be able to laugh at yourself. So yeah, in no ways do I hate DCS. I have all the respect for them for keeping this simulation hobby going, but absolutely do not hate them. It's just all for fun. Do you ever fly online? Absolutely I do. Originally, when I got on the MicroPro's beta team for Falcon, it was strictly for my squadron, the 469th Mad Hatters, and our primary goal was to do the online testing. You know, this is back in the modem days. In the, you know, the beginning of Falcon turning into BMS and all that, we used to do lots of flying. Probably back, was it 2007, I believe, our squadron, the 157th, we were the first to have, as far as we know, no one challenges on it, but we were the first to have an international squadron. And, you know, back in those days, if you had a stable flight to take off and land was a good thing. And I think we had up to, I think, 16 people back in those days. So yeah, I definitely did lots of online flying. While I was building the simulator and getting into it and kind of starting it up and getting it flying and testing things out and improving things. I didn't do a lot of online flying. I kept it just solo play. But lately, the last few months, I've been getting back into online flying again and absolutely love it. So I guess in the future, a lot of my videos, if you're following me on YouTube, you're going to start noticing that they're more online stuff. So yeah, absolutely, I fly online and love it. Why only BMS? Yeah, that's one I get asked a lot. I kind of answered that with question number 9 on whether or not I hate DCS. Again, I fly BMS because I'm a long-time Falcon lover. I've been flying it since my Amiga 500, 1986, 87, something like that. I was part of the original beta team for Falcon 4. Was a beta tester in the early BMS days, and yeah, that's all I know is Falcon. I love it, and I'll probably never change. But again, as I said before, it's just way more realistic if you want to operate an actual F-16. And you know, like I said, it's especially nice when you can tailor the avionics to suit whatever block you're flying. Anybody who follows me on YouTube will notice I fly with the green MFDs. I don't use data link. From all the information that I gathered, my setup is pretty realistic to what the current Greek Block 50 PX2s are using. That's kind of the way I like to keep it. So yeah, BMS for life. Why a Greek F-16? That's a good question. About 20 years ago, when I did my first cockpit made out of wood, I modeled it after the US Air Force 157th. I think it's cool when you build projects like this to detail it right down to a specific country, squadron, block. So I was looking for something different. Also because I guess with a lot of the new fighters coming out in US Air Force technology, I wanted to stick with a country that are still using the F-16 for decades to come as their main premier fighter. So the Greek was one of them. And seeing how I'm Canadian, I'm not modeling Canadian fighter. It really didn't matter which country I picked. In the early 2000s, early days of YouTube, I found that the Hellenic Air Force had a lot of really cool F-16 videos that I used to watch for hours and hours. They had that really great F-16 startup video that's still on the internet. I think it's been watched a million times by now. That was really cool because it gave us a first look at inside the jet when it's starting up and some of the procedures. So I got really hooked on the Hellenic Air Force. And I have a lot of respect for them. I've always liked the Greek culture, so it just seemed like a good pick. And of course, now I've turned this whole room into a Hellenic Air Force kind of fan room, and specifically to the 347 Squadron, hence the patches and the markings on the cockpit itself. So yeah, I think it was a great choice. VR is better. Why not use VR? Well, I think that's a matter of an opinion. I built this cockpit for a reason. I want to see the cockpit. I want to flip the switches. It's all about the procedural stuff that I like. Flying around is great fun too, but in the end, I'm spending a lot more time looking at the cockpit, looking at what's going on, than I am looking outside. So absolutely, there's a benefit to VR, having that 360-degree field of view and looking all around you. But in the end, I'm more into the procedural stuff. I like, if you follow the Warthog project, he brought this up in one of his videos. I don't remember when it was, but he brought up a good point. And I think it's one of the most important points is the social aspect of it. When I had my desktop hit with a VR headset and people came around the corner and they looked at it, they probably looked at me like I was some little gamer geek. And, I'm not trying to insult anybody who has that setup. I've had that setup. At some point, I'm going to build that setup again so I can kind of mess around in DCS with all the great mods that they have. But when people walk into this garage and they see this real aircraft cockpit and all the real parts, it definitely is a social aspect. My buddies love it. They love jumping in and flying it. You give them that kind of experience. So yeah, definitely is a downfall when you're flying a setup like mine where you can't look straight up or you have to use keys to kind of be able to do that. But for me, if you ever sit in a cockpit like mine with the widescreen in front of you, I think you'll see that, yeah, it actually is a way better setup and a lot more fun. Why don't you use a real HUD? I get asked that one quite a bit, and it's pretty simple. I nail it down to the fact that when you have a setup like mine, I'm constantly moving it, pulling it away from the screen to do work on it, and having to kind of realign that would just be an actual nightmare. And where I'm sitting looking through the glass at the HUD on the screen, it seems like a real HUD to me. When you guys watch my videos with a GoPro on the top part of my head, you can kind of see the HUD is offset from the glass. But where I'm sitting in the cockpit behind the glass, you don't even notice it, and you almost can't even tell whether it's real or fake. So it's just a simpler way to do it. It's always lined up. Whenever I pull my cockpit away, I just have to move it back to where it was, and everything is just a lot simpler. Not to mention, I've yet to see anybody who had the HUD working properly, where it's truly culminated, where everything's lined up. I've tried other cockpits where people have a HUD, and when it's not that, you're shifting your focus. So yeah, for me, it's just way easier. And you know, there's a reason why the mil-spec simulators are doing the same thing that I do. It's just a lot easier and not worth the hassle. Can you fly DCS in your cockpit? Absolutely I can. I can fly any sim for that matter. I can play Call of Duty sitting in the cockpit if I really wanted to. Because in the end, it's nothing more than a keyboard emulator, and I'm extracting certain screens and putting them on the MFD. So really, it's just a matter of setting it up. I don't currently, because I only fly BMS. I don't really have a lot of interest in flying DCS. It doesn't seem to keep my interest. So the amount of work it takes to set everything up, I just don't bother. I just keep one setup, keep it simple, stupid kind of thing, and I seem to have less issues that way. How do I check 6? Well, the simple answer is I don't. The long answer is there's no way I can do it without using modified views that I've set up, where I can use key commands to look kind of to my right, left, or behind me. But I don't really need to do it that much. I've never been much of a BFM guy. I'm more into air-to-ground profiles and try to fly the exact numbers like the real pilots do. I find it more challenging. I've flown over 1,300 campaign missions. Honest to God, how many times I got into a turning fight with the style of flying that I do? Probably 10, 15 times. And when I do that, I go to old school padlocking. Yeah, it's a big pain in the ass, not very effective. It certainly deters my probability of success in a fight, because I get disoriented quite easy, but yeah, it doesn't really bother me that much. I'm humble enough to say that most people watching this video can probably kick my butt in BFM. Just don't really care. I'm more into the air-to-ground stuff. I like looking at my cockpit, looking at the instruments and doing all that stuff. So my head is generally inside the pit more than it is out. And finally, number one, the most asked question, how much should I pay for it? I get asked that question quite a bit. Usually when I tell guys how much I paid or how much I paid for certain components, they usually lose their mind saying they can 3D print it for a fraction of the price. That is true, absolutely you can, but there's no way you can justify to me the quality of your 3D print compared to what I'm using, right? It's simple. It's a supply and demand thing. It's hard to find these parts. It's taken me years to find them. And when they are available, you're fighting against other guys who want them, and you got to pay for it. That's how it works. I paid a little over $120,000 by now, kind of lost count. I keep receipts and everything for my insurance, obviously. But that was over a 6-year period, so it doesn't really seem like I spent that much. If I had to buy one today for that much, there's no way I would spend that much. So it's funny how you do things over the course of time. But you look at other guys' hobbies, how much do they spend a year on alcohol, golfing, or whatever? So in the end, if you want to enjoy your hobby, you got to pay for it, and you get what you put into it, right? It's that simple. So yeah, I'll continue to put money into it and continue to invest in my hobby because I absolutely love it. So there you go. Those are the top 10 questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask and I'll answer them as well. Till then, we'll see you on the next one.